Comments for the next episode. Today's top comment comes from Zach Allen. He says the Australian Defence Force loadout primary is the AUG A3, representing the austere F88 A2 in Australia, our own variant, with an ACOG scope, underslung rail, heavy barrel, flat desert camo. And if you want an image of what one of the latest versions of this assault rifle looks like, it's pretty badass. Look at this beast. Very high tech, love the bullpup design of the AUG. For the secondary, we have the M1911 pistol, looks closest aesthetically to the Browning high powered. What we actually use, spray, is the Urban. We'll be using flashbangs, an M320 high explosive grenade launcher, the medic bag, bayonet for our knife, and Marpat desert camo. Defensive field upgrade because us Aussies are strong, less damage to the chest. If possible, stick with your squad, and if you are unsure about a corner, chuck a flashbang in there and rush them. Cheers from down under. Now I like the AUG a lot. It's a very recognizable assault rifle, one of the earlier bullpups that was designed, and it's basically stayed true to the original concept for a long time now, been updated, upgraded, and it's still a very cool, very prominent assault rifle. And putting a grenade launcher on the front end makes it look even cooler, although I will say Battlefield 4 seems to have rendered the M320 a little large. At least I think so. It looks totally crazy in terms of just how big it is compared to the rest of the gun. You can tell by how big the grip and trigger mechanism are compared to the actual gun's grip and trigger. But technical accuracies aside, once you throw a desert camo on here, this gun looks like it's been through some serious combat, and it looks pretty cool overall, especially with the ACOG on top. Although not my favorite optic, especially for this weapon, it does have its advantages at times. It does make it look very authentic. And although it's pretty much impossible to aim down sight for somebody who's extremely close to you, the AUG does have good hipfire accuracy. If you threw a laser sight on here, it'd be even better, but it allows you to deal with close quarter threats without having to ADS, because that just gets a little too difficult with a 4x optic. At medium range, the 4x is nice, although it can give you a little bit of tunnel vision, and I found that happening more often than not, where I'd be zeroing in on a target. I don't notice the guy that pops out to the left of me. I'm still engaging in a firefight, and then I get shot from the left side just because I've got that tunnel vision. So it's not my ideal scope for medium range. Long range, it's absolutely fine. It works really well for those long range encounters, and you'll surprise a lot of people by how fast you drop them with an assault rifle at those ranges. And that alone can give you a bit of an advantage. If they see you as an assault player, they see you really far away, and they try and cross some open ground, and all of a sudden you start landing tons and tons of shots, mowing them down. It's just a nice way to take somebody out because they totally underestimated your range skill. And without question, having magnified optics does give you better performance at range, not in terms of the physical recoil sense, the ability to control your weapon, but in terms of your optical perception, what you're able to see, and how well you're able to fine-tune your aim. Now, I mixed up my gameplay between Rush and Team Deathmatch. Those seem to be the only two game modes that I'm playing a lot of these days. Conquest can be fun when you're playing with friends, like in Squad Up and stuff like that, but in terms of just solo playing, I find Rush and TDM the most worthwhile game modes. The only problem is that Rush can be a bit of a hazard since there's so many 64-player servers out there, and it's harder to find those 32-player servers where the game mode actually plays out well. And of course, TDM is a bit chaotic by its nature, but at least you can find servers playing the maps you want to play with the server populations that you want to play frequently. So that's just kind of the situation on PC. I know there's a lot more 32-player Rush game modes on console and stuff like that, because I think smaller game servers on console were just popular earlier on because of the previous Battlefield titles. People got used to those game sizes and weren't quite as swayed by the 64-player game modes, as that's become kind of a staple on PC. If you're not playing 64-player game mode, you're not experiencing Battlefield the right way, and unfortunately just a lot of the maps aren't properly balanced for 64 players. The beginning of Hanan Resort here is an excellent example of when 64-player Rush doesn't work. No matter how well we pushed up and tried to hold off the enemy and get those MCOMs, it didn't really seem to matter because the enemy team had so many players, 32 players able to spawn in, parachute in at any moment, that we armed and got disarmed so many times over and over and over again, and it was just kind of chaotic. Plus they had snipers in every possible location you could think of, so it was just a little bit too nuts. And I gotta say, one of my favorite things to do is arm an MCOM and shoot somebody while you're arming it. You just feel like a total badass. You're like, that's right, I'm multitasking. Now, aside from the beginning of the round, I think Rogue Transmission TDM is one of my favorite Team Deathmatch maps. I think the spawns are, generally speaking, far enough away. They do have some bad spawn cam camping locations in it that are possible to spawn camp, but not foolproof. So it's one of my favorite maps in terms of just moving around a lot, and the elevation level doesn't change too drastically. It's just 2 stories on the main buildings, and especially now that they got rid of the ladder on the crane, people can't get on top of the roofs and kind of exploit the map. So overall, I think the flow of this map works out pretty well. Now, the central point in the center of the map by the base of the tower is probably one of my favorite spots to be, because you can just kind of run around it and get a view on any location in the map, so you can see where your team is and try and support them. Or if you're on the front lines, then you can kind of back up a little bit and wait for the enemy to come up some of the ladders that are very easy to defend. It's just a good location to be. Obviously, you can get overrun if people are just coming up all the ladders at once, which is something that definitely happens, but it's still one of the best defensive and offensive locations in the map, in my opinion. Now, having an underslung grenade launcher is not only cool looking, but it actually gives you a little bit more speed when it comes to switching to your grenade launcher and back to your primary. It's great for being in the middle of action, noticing that somebody's on the other side of a wall, switching to the grenade launcher instantly, blowing up the wall and switching back to your primary to finish them off. It's just a great combination. It looks badass when you do it. You feel like a total badass, and it just feels a little bit more smooth than having to switch to a gadget that's separate from your weapon. Now, as for the attachments on this gun, I don't know if I would normally run with heavy barrel. I don't really like adding more to my recoil when it's not necessary, and the pros from it, although they are good, I don't think really outweigh the extended recoil, especially if you're using a magnified optic. I try and reduce recoil as much as possible on a fully automatic weapon if I'm using something like a 4x scope, because it just jumps the camera too much. You can absolutely get used to it. It's not the easiest thing in the world to get used to, but if you practice with it a lot, I'm sure you could be comfortable. I just don't really like it, so I'd probably just run the same exact setup if you wanted to do an ACOG with the AUG and just no heavy barrel. That would probably give you a little bit easier performance overall. Anyway, I did really enjoy playing with this loadout. I love the AUG in general, so it doesn't take a lot for me to pick an AUG loadout, although this one did have over 300 upvotes, which certainly helps. I highly trying out the AUG even if it's not the specific loadout, because it's an assault rifle that's never going to be called the try-hard or overpowered assault rifle, but it can absolutely hold up to the pressures of some of the more powerful assault rifles in the game. Anyway, that wraps it up for this episode of Loadout. Don't forget to leave your comments down below letting me know what to run with for next.